Welcome, welcome, land of the morning, pearl of the Orient. Welcome, land good evening, land of the sea to the shining sea. I am Silverio Cabellion Jr., co-host of this webinar series representing research cluster number 11, which deals with medicine, pharmaceuticals, and health. I would like to introduce my co-host this evening, who is Dr. Victoria Herrera. Dr. Herrera is from Boston University, but her genealogy comes from the first president of the Republic of the Philippines. So I shall leave that for you all to research. So Dr. Herrera will be handling our question and answer period. In this series of webinars of the Philippine American Academy for Science and Engineering, we have dealt with quantum physics. We will be handling quantum physics. And later on, we have actually handled the infinity of astrophysics. So from the nanomolecule to the large universe, PAASE has dealt with all these subjects. But tonight, our subject is the genome. The program will start with an introduction from the director of the Philippine Genome Center, Dr. Felakbawan, followed by our presenters, Dr. Ayes and Dr. Basco, a reaction from Dr. Susan Echeverry, and then some closing remarks and perspectives from the president of the Philippine American Academy for Science Engineering. I shall be very brief with my introductions tonight. You can read their very outstanding and stellar bio notes in some of the notes that we have given you. So I shall start with introducing Dr. Felakbawan. Dr. Felakbawan is my neighbor. Yesterday, we had isang oras yata at saka kalahati kami nag-uusap kung bakit kaya, ano. Pero Pe is a graduate, is a Pisay. Yung mga Pisay yata sa Philippine Science High School. And she went to Los Baños kasi the topic that the discipline that she was interested in was not available at Diliman. And then, of course, after Los Baños, went to the UP College of Medicine, and all of these prestigious institutions of the United States, including the NIH. So without much ado, ma'am, I shall give you the floor to introduce the Philippine Genome Center. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, good evening to everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to highlight what the Philippine Genome Center is and how it grew since its inception in 2009 and what we're going to face for the next 5 years. So we call it now the partner of OMICS R&D services and extension because we've actually expanded to not only to genomics, but also to other omics, including metabolomics, transcriptomics, and the like. And then, oops, next slide. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is introduce Philippine Genome Center as a whole, and then Dr. Edsel Ayes and Dr. Neil Bascos will talk about their own areas of expertise. And of course, Dr. Ayes will talk about the COVID or the SARS-CoV-2, when the Philippine Genome Center was the epicenter for all of the sequencing activities in the Philippines. So I mentioned earlier, July 31, 2009 was the establishment of the Philippine Genome Center, and it's until now under the UP system, under the office of the Vice President of Academic Affairs, and Dr. VP Leo Cubilian is the existing head for us. Next slide, please. Oh, that's the building. The background is the building, Philippine Genome Center in Diliman. So the center is actually a center of excellence in gene discovery and genomics research that would effectively translate knowledge in applications beneficial to the whole country and the society, right? So that's the vision. And so unlike human genome, it's actually genome for all organisms, be it plants, animals, fishes, and some other organisms. So we also deal with those every organism that has nucleic acid as a part of the cell. So next slide. We would love to leave the mark in such a way that we will cover diagnostics, therapeutics, DNA forensics, preventative products, and improved crop varieties, or fishes, or fisheries or animals, right? So practically, again, as I said, we're using the same platform and technology, but we're almost like covering a varied set of organisms. Next slide. So the history of Philippine Genome Center, next slide. It actually started as a virtual kind of like center, right? So 2009, 2012, there was not really a physical office until 2014. And then the Center for CFB or Bioinformatics actually was, or the PGC1 was established, or groundbreaking was done in April 14, in 2014. So that's practically like 10 years ago, right? So 1 decade. And then slowly they built the Philippine Genome Center. Dr. Carmencita Padilla, Dr. Eva Cotionco, Dr. Saloma, they all led the group in such a way that what we see now is like the brick by brick establishment of a lot of expertise within the Philippine Genome Center. And at the same time, we are empowered to have a lot of the bioinformatics as well as infrastructure that would help advance Philippine genome researches and other translational researches within the Philippines. So next slide. Okay. So aside from the main campus in Diliman, we have satellite facilities like the UP Mindanao PGC and the UP Visayas PGC. And that actually has been a blessing because when pandemic hit, they acted as the regional reference for COVID or SARS-CoV-2 viral genome sequencing. And so they have been mobilized and they acted as part of the whole program. And they contributed a lot in terms of the regional data coming from Mindanao and Visayas. And so I will also talk about what is beyond 2022, or 2022 and 2020 to 2025, or even beyond, because with all the infrastructure that has been accumulated, or at least built in the Philippine Genome Center during the COVID or pandemic period, we have to pivot to something that is actually more relevant and translational in nature. So I'll further discuss that. Slide. What is the organization of Philippine Genome Center? Next slide. So I actually have two assistant to executive director covering both the core facilities and the research and development. And under the research and development, there are program directors, one for health, one for agriculture, one for biodiversity, and another one for computational genomics. And then for the core services, we offer DNA sequencing, we do metabolomics, and of course, the core facility for bioinformatics, and then the proteomics, metabolomics core facility. And then we're adding another core facility, which is actually for biorepository. Next slide. So I had the group, a very talented group actually, and of course the executive committee is composed of the different directors and program, as well as the assistant to the executive director. And of course, we wouldn't exist without administrative staff and services. Next slide. So Dr. Eva Cotionco, who heads the health program, actually also is the assistant to the executive director for research and development. And then next slide. She also is the executive director for National Institutes of Health in UP Manila. Then Vice Chancellor, formerly Vice Chancellor Philip Ian Padilla, who's also a graduate of the University of Philippines College of Medicine, is my assistant for services and extension. And actually, I was just lucky to stumble into PIP. He is known within the NIH group here in the US, and it just so happened that he's on sabbatical leave, and I actually recruited him to be part of the Philippine Genome Center, and really blessed that he accepted the position. And so we have, as I mentioned, biobank core facility that's being built as we speak, and actually the core facilities. Next slide. And then, of course, Dr. Noel, or Victor Marc Emmanuel, is actually the director for the Philippine Genome Center in Visayas, and then Dr. Joel Hassan Tolentino for the PGC Mindanao. Next slide. So what are our services? I mentioned the sequencing. Next slide. We have all the technical services, as I mentioned, in the core facility, but just so to expound on some of the other services besides the actual bench work and the core facilities that are existing, we do technical services. Researchers who actually need design and budget for the use of the facility within Philippine Genome Center come to us, and actually they are helped. And submission for proposals to the DOST or DOH or any other council within the research councils that are providing grants. They can come to us, and we provide those services for them, with the understanding though that they would use the facilities once they are actually granted the proposal. So the core facility also does extension services, and very active in Mindanao and Visayas. They have day in, day out kind of like activities that actually enriches the whole regional talent pool, as well as the capabilities within the region. They train high school students, they train faculty, high school teachers, and practically some of them who have been helpful in terms of the mobilization during the COVID or pandemic. And then I mentioned earlier, we are a service lab, and so anything on proteomics and sequencing, as well as other genetic testing, we can actually provide those services. Next slide. What are our accomplishments? Next slide. Decade and a half past, 15 years from its inception, we're actually basically implementing and promoting research, program-driven agendas, as well as anything that has to do with whatever services and infrastructure we have. Next slide. Here are the numbers, and I think those numbers on the left are mostly COVID, and just so you understand that number of COVID samples, and most of them are stored, and therefore the need for the biorepository. And then I mentioned some of the activities that the staff are doing. They train and they do a lot of conferences as well as extension services. So this is just a snapshot, and I think it's modest enough, and really we have made a dent. However, there are more things to do as we face more challenges. Next slide. Just a snapshot. I think the ones that are highlighted are the ones that are actually going to happen. And I would emphasize the fact that when I joined Philippine Genome Center in September 2023, one of my primary mandate is really to utilize the infrastructure to pivot it in such a way that we could service the country's needs in genetics and genomics diagnostics testing. So informatics, as well as the information management system of the laboratory, needs to be upgraded. And then with the incoming grants, or most likely be funded, like the 1001 rice genome sequencing, and then the high yield, the Philippine, those are really big data generated from all those sequences. And so we have beefed up the Philippine Genome Information Research Hub, which is actually a Philomics, and I would discuss that later. But point being that I think we cannot leapfrog any activities at the Philippine Genome Center if we don't have a well-established information system as well as information management systems. So that is like one of the primary activities that we're trying to address. And then the rest on the list is practically, it has been done, and some of them we're still continuing. And of course, the Philippine COVRA, or Philippine Genomics Biosurveillance dashboard, was created and Dr. Ayes will actually emphasize his talk on the COVID initiative. Next slide. So maybe on these slides, I would just highlight, we do shrimp, we do abaca, we do banana, sugarcane, coconut, and of course, makapuno is part of the coconut genome sequencing. And so all of those things, because we know that this is, the Philippines is an agricultural country, and so that's the main source of a lot of our people's income. Next slide, please. And then, of course, biodiversity and ethnicity forensic. There's not a lot of studies. However, we know that forensic is something that the Philippines also would need. We will not be, I think this is one I would make clear, we will not be we will help forensic infrastructure, but we will not be the main sequencing lab for the forensic, because I think we're trying to figure out the best way to set it up, because we are for research and development as well as diagnostics and therapeutics. So that is another area that probably can be handled by another group. Of course, Philippine marine and microbial genomics, as well as coral reefs and the like. And then for health, this is where I would emphasize, because I've been in the field for more than 25 years, and I think that we are actually far behind in terms of genetics and genomics diagnostics in the Philippines. Dr. Eva Cotionco and Dr. Padilla and all of those other geneticists within the country would need some of this infrastructure for diagnostics. Right now, most of this testing that are done in the Philippines are sent out, and they're very expensive. So it's very inaccessible and not really that affordable. So we would love to concentrate on this part of the health diagnostics so that we could be competitive within Southeast Asia and maybe eventually globally. Next slide. we're trying to help the viral genome database as well, because after COVID, I think that we have the right talent and infrastructure to help that to be realized. And then, of course, we have the metabolomics, which would be discussed by Dr. Neil. And then we move on with the Philippine Genome. They have some studies on cardiovascular as well as diabetes and some cancer, hereditary cancer genes. And so we'll continue with really developing a diagnostics for some of these cancer genes and then and other cancers. And we're in fact actively collaborating with nonprofit organizations, and the bio repository is actually started with the cancer samples. Next slide. So expansion to the regions is one of the main kind of like activities within the Philippine Genome Center. And that's why we have the Visayas and Mindanao. And then we're actually supporting and strengthening as well as enabling a lot of researchers in the region. And we would love to build the talent pool as well as retain them. And that's like retention is one of the main kind of challenge here. And then facilitate those collaborations, because it's only through collaboration within the Philippines and then maybe even outside of the Philippines that we would really move genetics and genomics. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. I will not belabor the mobilization during the COVID-19 pandemic, but I'll use this as a as a pivot to what are we going to do in the next 5 years. Next slide. So they truly, the pressure during the pandemic gave us the opportunity to have a good collaboration between the government, the academia, and testing laboratories within the Philippines. And so this partnership led to kind of like the Department of Health leaning on us to really continue the biosurveillance program in the country. And 2 weeks or a couple of weeks ago, we had a workshop with the DOH, and we think that the Philippine Genome Center should play a big role in continuing preparedness and actually actively developing all those tests that needs to be deployed on emerging and re-emerging infections, so that when I mean, God forbid it happens, and it's a matter of when it happens maybe, and cross our fingers, we shouldn't be, hopefully we don't have it, but if ever it happens, we would be ready and really mobilized easily to answer to any of those emergencies. Next slide. So with that, they've generated big data, right? So then moving forward for the Philippine Genome Center, we understand that there would be databases that would be needed, and bioinformatics as well as high performance computing needs. So we're preparing for all those. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we will continue to strengthen the research and intensive university goals, and then we'll actually offer the multi-omics technologies, and we're looking at some other technologies too that can be brought to the Philippine Genome Center. Next slide. This is the Philippines' contribution to GSAID, or this is like the database, right? Global database where you actually submit viral whole genome sequences, and they've done that during the pandemic. But I think that the WHO is also interested in creating those regional laboratories that would really answer to any kind of pandemic in the future. Next slide. And just, I think this is just the biobank samples within the Philippine Genome Center. And you would see when you come to the Philippine Genome Center, freezers and freezers and freezers side by side. And I think that we have to have a system that is actually being developed for biorepository. Next slide, please. So I talked about big data. So our knowledge and resources, huge volumes of sequences associated data with all the data sets that we produce. And at the same time, we're trying to build on the infrastructure to really address the Filipinome or the whole genome sequencing for Filipinos, which is actually led by Dr. Eva Cotionco. And that in itself would give us a Philippine genome that is a reference sequence. And for those who are actually in the genetics field, the Filipinos in particular and Southeast Asian as a group are not really well represented in the reference sequence for whole genome sequences in the United States, or the human genome build, where we actually have every nucleotide in the genome of the different ethnicities have been sequenced. So if we get to a point where we are done with our Filipinome, it's the largest data set in the Philippines, and that could be something that we could contribute globally. Next slide, please. And with all the different centers in the Philippines that have high compute centers, we would love to connect or even really make sure that we have backups and we are engaged with that networks, so that if anything else, we could be utilizing and maximizing compute power within those centers. And especially Mindanao and Visayas, where we have the Philippine Genome Centers. Next slide. And so I talked about the Philomics earlier. It's a hub for genomic information, and it will really be able to, we have this group of bioinformatics and they're very young and very talented. And we hope that we build this center that would really cater to sharing and collaboration. It would facilitate data analysis as well as storage of data and access of data. So we hope that that will really propel some of the researches that are locally being done in the country. Next slide, please. Okay, so mentioned the different programs within Philippine Genome Center, and of course, health and personalized medicine or precision medicine. We hope that we could actually support that practice within the Philippine General Hospital, as well as the other private hospitals and public hospitals in the country. I mentioned the high performance computing. We actually, the Board of Regents recently approved 100 million pesos to support the Philomics. And this is like one of my positive experiences within the UP system when I defended the budget for Philomics, and we were just asking for 85 million, and one of the regent actually asked me if that's enough, and I said no. And so right there and then they reprogrammed 15 million additional funding for the Philomics. Next slide. So the challenges are actually apparent, right? So we don't have much. There are people who understand databases. However, there's not really a good database that has been built. And we started with the viral genome or the virome, but we still need to move into a different organisms, as well as eventually the Filipinome database. So that is one area where anyone in the audience who's interested in bioinformatics, data sciences, and all the different talents and expertise that would really touch on databasing, please contact us and we would love to talk to you. And of course, retention and increase in manpower. We don't have that much in terms of positions, and we're trying to build the group, but as we understand, or as we get more people interested in the Philippine Genome initiatives, we are able to actually ask for more plantilia or items through the UP system. Next slide. Oh, so the Filipinome is actually kind of 10,000 Filipino genomes, both 5,000 I think is for the deceased or different disease states, cancer, diabetes, hypertension, name it, whatever. And then another 5,000 for normal Filipinos, or at least non-deceased Filipinos, right? So then we could use that as a reference sequence for Filipinos. And then from there, we could identify disease-causing variants and maybe eventually would lead to not only diagnostics, but therapeutics if they're very specific for any of those variants that we need for treatment. Next slide, please. Oh, mentioning the fact that as we do Filipinome, we would love to offer the services for diagnostics, and practically as part of that kind of activities, we would love to partner with whoever in the United States or any part of the world is working on genomics and genetics, and you're welcome to reach out to us and try and understand what you could actually contribute to the Philippine Genome Center. As we actually, as I mentioned, we're trying to really make sure that we strengthen bioinformatics, information technology, information management systems, as we go for digital transformation and building those biorepository and databases to help in terms of translational research. Next slide, please. One of the things that probably is highlighted during this time is the partnership between private and public institutions as well as individuals. So we would love to forge those national, international collaborations and render translational laboratory services both in diagnostics and therapeutics, because we're kind of far behind and we would love to leapfrog that kind of activity. And we have a grand plan of let's bring those technology that would really make us more sufficient and sustainable in the next 5 years. So we would partner with foreign laboratories who provide diagnostics as well as therapeutics, and then practically parallel developing our own capabilities and laboratories so that we could eventually develop our own tests and then serve the country with whatever we have. And that drives the accessibility as well as the affordability of those diagnostics and therapeutics. Slide. And for that to happen, we need to have a reliable and sustainable financial resource. And so with all the activities that we're doing in the core facilities, that actually sometimes, it's not a lot, but the researchers who actually had asked us to help them for those grant applications, they come back to us. And so we have actually gathered, or at least they have contributed to a trust fund for every core facility within the Philippine Genome Center. And hopefully we could also get something from the Senate and or at least the House bill. We're trying to work on a House bill to make us more really, the government can appropriate some funds regularly to the Philippine Genome Center so that we could sustain all activities and the support to research and development for other areas. Next slide, please. Okay, of course, operational excellence is something that needs to happen. We have a lot to gain from experiences here and abroad, but we need to have systems that would really make things efficient and streamlined. And really, truly, one of the challenges that I have right now is making sure that we actually operate as best as we can and as less expensive as we can. So We have building 1 right now, but we're building 2 and 3, Philippine Genome Center in Diliman, and also Mindanao is trying to build their own. So it's like all of this needed funding and operational excellence and everything, but talent retention as well as really we need support from every angle so that we could really sustain all the activities. Next slide. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to play out there is that specifically for health and genomics and genetics, we have a capsule proposal to the PCHRD that has been encouraged to a full proposal, and this group, Dr. Velarde and Francis Tabliso had put together all these ideas, and we're trying to build an interoperable health information, and we call it iHealth desk, because we would love to have that interoperability and connectivity to hospitals, to physicians, to non-government or government organizations that actually can share and collaborate within the ecosystem. And that ecosystem has not yet been built. And so we're creating that as we speak, in terms of they've actually put the plan together, but we would love for us to get the funding, and we're doing it also by phases. So there's like 3 or 4 programs within that proposal, and we hope that if anyone is interested, reach out and we can give you more information. So I end this introduction. It's a little bit long, but I think that it will set the stage for Dr. Neil Bascos and Dr. Edsel Ayas for their specific areas within PGC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Executive Director. Flirt. Nag-flirt yata yung mga lalaki o yung mga babae. Well, I mentioned flirt because our next speaker will be handling the COVID pandemic. And as I see from his bio, he comes from a very young medical school, Ateneo de Manila. But Ateneo de Manila being a maroon and he being a blue eagle, I always bow to them because the Ateneans have a way of speaking English that even me with an American education overwhelms what they say. Dr. Ayas is from the Ateneo School of Medicine, an internist. Then he went to the United Kingdom, learned about immunology and virology. Without much ado, I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Ayas and see what he can tell us about what's going on with the epidemic and what happened during the epidemic. Dr. Ayas, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the very warm introduction. And also I'd like to thank the PAASE for inviting me to give this talk on behalf of the Philippine Genome Center. So I currently head the Clinical Genomics Laboratory, which is the clinical arm of the Philippine Genome Center. We were initially, just a little background on the laboratory, it was first conceptualized as a service arm and extension of the services of PGC in order to serve the medical doctors, in the form of clinical genomics using next generation sequencing technology. I came in 2019 when they were still setting things up. I actually was under Dr. Bascos, who was our next speaker. So I worked with him at the Proteomics facility, and then the pandemic happened. So things kind of went warp speed. And long story short, there was a lot of support from both the academe and also the DOH to help propel the Clinical Genomics Laboratory into becoming a COVID-19 testing facility. So we were one of the first DOH accredited COVID-19 labs that went online at the end of April 2020. And at that time, we were serving most of the Rizal region and also Region 3. So there was a lot of labs that we were serving. But come the end of 2020, there was already the threat of the Alpha variant, if you can remember. So there was a sudden call at the Malacanang, and Dr. Saloma and Dr. Eva Cochonco de la Paz attended it. I was also with them in support, and we were asked the basic question: kaya ba ng Pilipinas na gumawa ng variant detection for the purposes of biosurveillance? And ang sagot ni Dr. Saloma was very straightforward: yes. So by as early as the end of 2020, going all the way into 2021, our laboratories, together with the DNA Sequencing Core facility, have been engaging and collaborating with the DOH Epidemiology Bureau in order to provide variant detection and monitoring biosurveillance for the country. And you can actually see it here, the extent of which we were actually performing the testing. In 2020, we were mostly RT-PCR, and by 2021, naging half-half na. So we were doing as many as 20,000 both testing and also biosurveillance. But by around September 2021, we realized, alam mo, there were already 260 COVID-19 testing laboratories. The country had already kind of figured out a sort of process by which they can provide testing services. So we decided to go full speed with biosurveillance. And you can see by 2022, halos wala na kaming RT-PCR testing. But we did still do some small amounts of testing for the UP Diliman community. So our UP Health Service here was still sending us samples that we would test for COVID-19. And here you can see how many regions how many DRUs. DRUs are your disease reporting units. So this is in the biosurveillance network, which I'll show later, across 13 different regions. And alongside that, we also provided training. So ito yung parang the extent of which PGC was providing services during the pandemic. And I'd like to give a little bit of focus of how PGC was able to assist the DOH in terms of mapping out its biosurveillance efforts. We were actually instrumental in formulating some of the policies regarding how to go about the biosurveillance. So this is just a study that was from the early part of the pandemic, which showed that a cutoff value for the CTs can be used to screen samples. Kasi as much as you would like to sequence all samples, it's very impractical. And especially because of the archipelagic nature of the Philippines, mahirap din magpadala ng samples all over. In fact, that's the reason why we tapped the expertise and also developed the resources in both Visayas and Mindanao to also contribute to the biosurveillance effort. But majority of the samples were still being sent to us. And based on this study, the initial CT value cutoff that we were talking about was 25. So this study just shows you that there's a direct correlation between genome coverage, because you're reconstructing the genome in order to use your bioinformatics networks to see what variant it is, and CT score. So as the CT value goes up, the chances of you reconstructing the genome in its totality goes down, and therefore the accuracy of your variant assignment goes down. So this study was saying 25 would be a good cutoff. But after the first month or two of the biosurveillance effort, there were complaints coming in from the DRUs saying that nahihirapan po kami mag-meet ng 25 kasi karamihan ng testing nila, it would be a little on the higher side. So there was this sort of balancing act, like, do we forego sending these samples that are in critical regions, but they just don't meet the cutoff? So eventually, there was a meeting with the experts, with the IATF. So that was the interagency task force of which our two esteemed, our director, Dr. Saloma, and also our previous director, Dr. Saloma, and also Dr. Eva Cochonco were a part of. They were able to discuss, and they decided to increase the CT value to 30. So what we did here in the lab, and this is just to show you of how PGC is playing a role and can continue to play a role in policy development in terms of biosurveillance and also in other genomics related applications in the country. But we wanted to look into the comparison of CT values. So this is just a study that we're still in the process of publishing, but I'm sharing it with you now. We looked at basically when samples come in, we still test it for QC purposes to check the CT value of samples submitted. So we just compared the CT value of the samples that were submitted to us and the CT that we record here. Because in principle, we understand that as samples are transported, there is a chance that the RNA present inside or the genetic material degrades to a certain extent. So understanding that the CT value is a surrogate measure of the amount of RNA or DNA recovered in the sample and the likelihood of reconstruction, we assume that the CT values would increase slightly, right? So this again shows you how we're comparing from all of these different disease reporting units going all the way here to PGC, and we compared the two values. And this is what we found out, that even if you increase the cutoff rate to 30, it is comparable to even 27, CT27 in terms of genomic coverage. So if you remember the diagram a while ago, you'll see that it's quite comparable, and this translates to around 1,482 samples that would not have been sequenced and identified had they not reached that that threshold. So this shows at least to the DOHEB that the decision to go with a higher CT value is actually it was a justified response, But you have to keep in mind this also has much to do with the expertise of the group. So we actually give a lot of credit to the DSCF, that it shows that their DNA sequencing and their ability to handle the specimens and sequence them is also nandun, also with the CFB, And this is also another interesting and somewhat counterintuitive finding that we looked at. So we also looked at it in terms of region, and we looked at the odds, binary logistic regression for the odds of successful sequencing. So this is looking at what are the odds that if it came from this region, we'll be able to give it a successful assignment. And what we found out was the further it was from the lab, the higher the chances you'd assign properly. So that means samples that were coming from Visayas and Mindanao had a more likely chance that they would get an assignment compared to samples that came from NCR region or from Luzon, right? So, and this is across 21,000 samples that were tested during 2021. And when we did interviews to try and understand more, we realized that in Visayas and Mindanao, in order for it to be sent to us, they went through professional courier services that are ITAF accredited. So these are like air freight logistics partners. So the moment they'd reach here in NAIA, they would be directly transferred via courier services. So all throughout the process of sending here, there is some form of logistics intervention, temperature monitoring, and they're all basically maganda. The Luzon is interesting because since it's close, a lot of the laboratories submitting to us were self-conducted. So that means they came from hospitals who would use their own, ambulances, for example. And a lot of them would conduct it via car. So they would end up in the traffic in Metro Manila. So it's just an interesting idea. But of course, this study only shows us this. The association and the relationship to those as the actual cause would be the subject for further research. So just a conclusion in this short study, just to show you how PGC is able to engage in terms of policy development and its application of its expertise in the context of the pandemic. We found out that, yes, using CT values is an adequate tool for determining, to optimize the resources and for sample recruitment in the pandemic. There's a need for logistical support. So we recently did have a workshop with the Department of Health Epidemiology Bureau and also the RITM, the Research Institute for Tropical Medicine. And one of the points raised that would be strengthened in the next pandemic response would be strengthening logistical networks, especially in the context of land-to-land logistics chain. And also, this set the stage for further research that can look into cold chain logistics, that can use some of the expertise and training that we can develop here from the PGC. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and also congratulations for a successful seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ayes. Our next speaker is again from that famous Philippine Science High School, a graduate of 1995. But I'd like to mention that the University of the Philippines Medical Alumni Society at one point, Dr. Bascos was a recipient of the professional chair. So therefore, as the pay forward, we shall put Dr. Bascos on the screen and see what is new with regards to Proteomics and Metabolomics. Mahirap yata i-pronounce ito. Sir,
Sir, mahaba-haba po yung mga pangalan.
the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tabellion. Let me share my screen. May I confirm if it's visible?
Yep. It's good.
Yes, po. Right. Okay. So good morning, everyone in the Philippines, and good evening to everyone else in the States. We'd like to thank the PAASE for giving us a chance to speak with you today. I actually believe that it's quite fitting that it is the PAASE that's hosting this particular event, and because what I believe that I will be talking about today is all about collaboration. And I think PAASE, by its very nature, really embodies the importance of cooperation and collaboration for success. And we hope to show you opportunities today to work with us as we choose to take on this mission, which is essentially to expand OMICS capabilities for a better Philippines. So my name is Neil Bascos. I'm the Program Director of the PGC PPMF. Mahaba po yung mga pangalan ng words kanina, so that's why we shortened it to the PPMF. As mentioned by Dr. Tabellion, I'm also from Pisay, 1995. So the roots go deep. With the PGC's success in the pandemic, as highlighted by Dr. Ayes, I think the notion that PGC can do proper genomics work is unquestionable. And that's why we thought, now we really shouldn't rest on our laurels. No, we really should take on a greater challenge, and that is to expand to the other multi-omics technologies. And that is what the PGC PPMF represents. So the PGC PPMF is the arm of the PGC, the Philippine Genome Center, that now does proteomics and metabolomics. That is looking at the total quantity, total identity, total types of proteins or metabolites that may be present in a given sample that may represent what is happening in that particular time for a given situation. Often we would have this as applications towards looking at what is different, let's say, in a diseased individual versus a healthy individual. What allowed us to do this really was the expansion of the infrastructure at the PGC. And of course, we thank the support of the DOST R&D for this. We were able to acquire what at that time was not available in the country, and that is a Thermo Fisher Orbitrap Fusion Tribrid mass spectrometer. It's a high resolution mass spectrometry system. In fact, it's the highest resolution mass spectrometry system in the Philippines. And what that allows us now to do is to do the metabolomic analysis or total metabolite characterization, as well as proteomic analysis, which is total protein characterization. So we've talked to a lot of the mass spectrometers at the time, and also the scientists that wanted to do these characterizations before in the Philippines. And often they would have to rely on the help of foreign partners to do this. But with the creation of the PGC PPMF, these activities, these analyses can now be done within the country. Just as an example of what this means, for metabolomics, we try to characterize the metabolites that are in a given sample, and we quantify what they are. We actually figure out what is up or down regulated in a given situation. So again, in the case of a disease, we might be able to see that certain metabolites are going higher, certain metabolites are going lower. And through our analyses, we actually might figure out, depending on which of these metabolites are affected, certain cellular pathways are enriched or altered by a given situation. What does that give us? Well, it gives us usually notion of where we might be able to find biomarkers, if it's important to be able to detect that disease happening, or in some more positive cases, if we understand how it's working, what mechanisms are being affected, then there may be opportunities for developing better therapies. So with our system, we can do that with many things. We apply it a lot to health, right? And of course, the the facility is only as good as how we use it. Now, so we're glad that we have the great infrastructure that's available with us now at the PGC-PMF. We also have a well-trained staff, and just to show some proof of that, we were running our numbers in terms of what we can do to analyze certain metabolite identifications. And I'm glad to report that the performance of the staff and the unit in the PPMF is at par or even better than some of the published data that we're getting from similar systems. So definitely kaya nga po ng mga Pilipino. How do we apply this? PGC-PMF, of course, is both a research and a service facility, meaning that we do have to do our own research. And one of the initial research projects that we did tackled one of the more important diseases that is affecting our country today, which is diabetes. So we have a DN-Metab project. This is a Metabolomics project looking at diabetes mellitus. So it's specifically called the identification of potential biomarkers in adult Filipino type 2 diabetes mellitus patients at different stages in diabetic nephropathy. Using untargeted metabolomics analysis. So only with our capacity to do metabolomics could we do this, could we find out which biomarkers might be better for saying the stage of diabetic nephropathy that may be present or may be avoided, ideally, by some individuals. We're working in this particular project with clinicians at the UPPGH, and also, if there is time, we can probably discuss more about this project. But we're in terms of the recruitment, it's actually been quite challenging, and to have more partners in this project, we actually are working also with the City Health Office of the Lungsod ng Manila, and of course the barangay health centers that they have as well. Aside from our diabetes project, we have an international collaboration in the form of the MEDIO eAsia project. This is a proteomic analysis of Philippine SARS-CoV-2 patient plasma using AI and high-resolution mass spectrometry. This one is actually a collaboration between 3 countries. We're working with scientists in Japan and Thailand in this one. Pictured on the top right are the PIs of this project. So, and also we're showing you here work that was done in Japan and is mirrored here in the Philippines now. So in the center we're showing you the what we can do here, in terms of 2D page analysis, and yeah, we're currently doing this analysis now on looking at different severities of SARS-CoV-2. Aside from our international partners, we have partnered with several hospitals here in the Philippines to try to be able to get a bigger range of patients to do the characterization on. So we are working with the PGH, the NCMH, the Don Jose N. Rodriguez Memorial Hospital and Sanitarium, or Tala Hospital, and also the LCP, the Lung Center of the Philippines. It's not all about health when we talk about omics. Sometimes we would want to relax or at least get the chance to do our work near the beach. And in this one was one of those opportunities. So another application that we've had a chance to do with our omics capabilities is to try to apply it towards characterizing Philippine biodiversity. Specifically, we're looking here at the profiling of Sardinella species that can be found in the Philippines. For those of you that are familiar with the Tawilis species that is found in Taal, it's the only freshwater sardine species, and we're looking at characterizing Tawilis in relation to its aquatic or marine cousins that can be found. In this case, this is Hualiensis that we found off the coast of Apari, way up in the north of Luzon. Right. So those are current projects that we're running as of this month. Aside from those that are currently being implemented by the facility, we have projects that are lined up as we continue to ensure that proteomics and metabolomics is done in the country. We have a project that is set to start in July. This one is looking at breast cancer. We're partnering here with the Medical City and actually Doc Ed as well in CGL, trying to look at breast cancer markers and whether or not we can apply both validated ELISA-based methods to detect certain biomarkers, as well as our HRMS system. And here's another big project that we have and quite proud of, because it shows you how through the exposure, no, and the knowledge that people have gained of our capabilities here in the country, there's more and more collaborations that are being built. No? The ALPAS program is actually a good example of that. So the ALPAS program here is showing you a collaboration of many different institutions within the country. Academia, no? So we have, as example for academia, we have Batangas State, we have PLM, we have Mapua, we have De La Salle. Now we have partners in the health industries. We have Chinese General Hospital, East Avenue. We also have international partners in Jet University in Korea as part of this. No? And of course, always through the support of the PCHRD. So this particular one goes back to what we were doing in terms of diabetes analyses, but now towards a more application-based type of research. In fact, we're looking at ways in which we can help treat diabetic foot ulcers. So please watch out for that in 2025. So I hope that's shown you how really the capabilities of doing omics here in the Philippines is growing. And what I'm most proud of and most encouraged with is the fact that it's not just only growing in terms of number, as we can see here. So we're seeing here in terms of number, how many metabolomic studies we've been doing since 2021 when we started the facility. It's definitely growing, but more than just the general number, I would want to focus on the fact that a lot of the increase is now happening in institutions outside the University of the Philippines. Now, of course, I think people expect a lot how the University of the Philippines system can take on a lot of these high ticket and important research projects that we need to do. But we're quite encouraged by the fact that we have a lot more local partners that are able to do this. And this, I think, reflects how really the capacity to do multi-omics work is here and is being made available to researchers all throughout the country. So we see here growth in terms of the metabolomics side and also in the proteomics side. Proteomics is a bit more, how do you say this? Metabolomics was well established before proteomics in terms of use here in the Philippines, especially because of natural product research. But now more and more people are doing proteomics. In fact, the growth in terms of institutions that want to do proteomics is better or bigger in the proteomics side than it is in the metabolomics side. So showing you the current distribution, we're still at about 30% in terms of proteomics work versus metabolomics, but that we hope to grow that, especially with the new projects. And again, in terms also of the distribution of institutions that can do it, a lot of it is still within the UP system, but it's growing. We're now at 30%. We're trying to do better than that in this year and then even better at 2025 and beyond. Part of the way in which we hope to do this is an extension program wherein we want to be able to discuss possibilities with clinician researchers. We believe some of the most important applications that we can have for omics capacities really would be in the health industry. And that's why we're talking with clinician researchers. We're actually holding workshops with at least 5 different institutions this year to try to really talk with them in terms of what would be the problems that are most relevant to their locations and how these omic technologies might be useful, and then how we can have applications that we can work with through them and build on their own research as well. So we're set to roll that out in the next few months. In terms of actual successes, we measure that sometimes in terms of the publications. We have had a few. And again, we want to grow this further as we finish up some of our research projects this year, and we will be working on the manuscripts that will be coming out with that. So I hope that has shown you the current capacities of the Philippines in doing omics work. And again, I thank the PAASE for giving us a chance to present what we can do here. We are very much appreciative of how PAASE represents Operation Collaboration, and we would be glad if you can work with us to help expand omics capabilities for a better Philippines. Thank you very much and good morning.
Thank you, Dr. Bascos. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
For a surgeon like me, trying to follow proteomics, this protein not only is made up of amino acids, and then it folds,
Yes, sir.
and then if it doesn't fold the right way, you are kaput, as my grandchildren would say. And to understand it is beyond the capabilities of the surgeon. So in order to put the proper perspective on this subject and the whole matter this evening, I invited Dr. Susan Echeverry, whose work deals with the day-to-day care of patients with genetic problems. Susan is, of course, graduated from the University of the Philippines. She lives in Chicago, and her expertise is genetics. So without much ado, I would like to call on Dr. Susan Echeverry to give us a perspective of what she heard this evening. Susan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Billy, for that nice introduction. And good evening from here, and good morning to you on the other side of the continents. I'm a little overwhelmed and intimidated by all these advancements that I have heard from you in our home country. And I am very, very glad that the Philippine Genome Center is manned or womaned by our director, who's a very capable geneticist, not just in the field of clinical or medical genetics, but also, as you have heard, in planning, in managing, in being director of a very revolutionary program in my home country. I'm also intimidated by the talk on, what shall I say, laboratory-based, workup-based, looking into genetics, not just from the medical point of view, but from the agriculture, livestock areas. I just did a paper, it's not my original paper, but I had called research activities and clinical activities based on CRISPR or genetic engineering technology. And to say that I am actually trying to keep up or be abreast with all these technologies, I was still awed by the amount of new research in those fields. And I am very, very happy that you guys, Dr. Lakbawan, Dr. Ayes, and Dr. Basco, are in the thick of things. I'm a medical geneticist. I am a clinical geneticist and board certified in those. And I was also a teacher for medical students and medical residents and other specialists in surgery et al. I love hearing this talk. I've learned a lot. And I will use the same word again, intimidated, only because of the OMICS shortening of the fields that you are thick into study. When I was writing the article on genetic engineering, I didn't even know how difficult it would be for other people to understand what I was calling from various researches and journal articles, because I had no idea how advanced training is in the primary sections of science teaching, when in fact it was during my time in Manila Science, we were just talking about bases and nucleic acids. And to have advanced this fast since 2009 is very, very admirable. The way the three of you had presented this is also commendable. And I will remember most, short of being not really, short of being none that elderly yet, hopefully that I can use that knowledge that I learned today from listening to you when I go into the genetics literature. I am struck at how fast you have grown into even doing whole genome sequencing. Thank you very much for letting me know that. I was the lab, let's put it this way. I was in charge of genetics laboratory issues when I was at the Cook County Hospital in Chicago, now known as Stroger Hospital. So my expertise at that time, and you can tell how primitive that was maternal serum alpha fetoprotein testing of people, or not just people, but women who were pregnant early in their pregnancies. I was able to ask for money or financing to get testing done on those that we had encountered who had breast cancer, because as you know, the kind of genome that would choose the kind of treatment and also genetic counseling for those women is very much dependent on what kind of mutations they had. So fast forward to this, and that's the reason why I'm so good. I had told Fe during the time that we spoke about this, just before today, that because I'm a clinical geneticist and because I had dealt with so many kinds of hereditary diseases, plus non-hereditary diseases, but new mutations, or not really new mutations as we thought of, because we still couldn't do mutation testing at that time, was how to impart this knowledge to those who are directly affected, like the parents, to do discussion on why this happened. So I looked into the most common and how this would be relevant to you guys for testing, of course, and in the background for follow-up for medical geneticists and genetic counselors, and of course for treatment if available. And I looked into the most into the what do you call this? The most common genetic, and not really genetic, but hereditary conditions that are diagnosed in the Philippines. And the only list that I could find was from my most loved Department of Pediatrics, the clinics there. And the number one diagnosis that they listed that they saw was Down syndrome. Unless, of course, any of the parents have Down syndrome themselves, either one, it is of course a genetic disease, but not hereditary. And the main thrust of our counseling would be to tell the parents, either the father or the mother, that it's not what they did or did not do or did not eat or were not exposed to that this happened. What my interest was, even from the time that I was a student, was to determine which kinds of hereditary diseases were working on the patient that we would see in the clinics and in the wards. And I have had very good experience with treating those, including Fabry, including not treating, but taking care of those with G6PD, and definitely those with alpha thalassemia. And I will just put in a very brief kind of story. When Henry was a resident, Henry is my husband, by the way. When Henry was a resident at the VA hospital, he was called like 3 times by the health, by the, how do you call this? The clinics where he had his workup before he could get listed as a resident. And the thing that they were trying to figure out was why he was so anemic. And he was anemic. And on his 3rd call that he had to go there because they kept on drawing blood from him, after my conversation with him, when he finally said, they keep on trying to find out why I'm so anemic and what they can do, and do I need transfusions, blah, blah, blah. And I told him, let me see the results. And lo and behold, his MCV was in the 60s, alpha thalassemia. And I'm only telling this as a story because I know alpha thalassemia is very prevalent in the Philippines. And knowing this ahead of time before delivery or whatever would, of course, arm the genetic counselors and the geneticists with appropriate counseling to the parents, and also maybe to look into the family situation and whether this hereditary diagnosis is present in the other SIBs. But I am digressing, and I know I only have a few minutes. That is the one of the things that I spoke with Fe about, the applications of your milestone discoveries would be very much needed, especially in a country where there may be many, many founder mutations because of the avalanche of immigration in the prehistoric age. It's a thing for us in our family to talk about the findings for 23andMe in myself, and the 3 kids that we have, because they found out, and it was a topic for laughter and whatever when we shared this, that I have more Neanderthal traits as well as my son, compared to like 90% of those they tested. So that it's not anything that we can treat for anyway. But to see the proteomics, the metabolomics, and all of that, and to see what the spectrum of mutations and non-mutations in the Philippine civilization, I'm not going to say that indigenous or not, would be wonderful. And to follow them up over time and to see what happens to them and what exposures in terms of medication, in terms of food, and how to test. And I hate to use that word to test as if it's something we can control, their future husbands or partners, and to counsel them as well would be wonderful. Not that we want to tell them not to marry this guy or have children with this guy or this female or this girl, but to prepare for their children who may need testing or who may not, and who may need treatment and who don't need any. I would love to visit your laboratory. I hate to call it laboratory because it brings to my memory my MSAFP days, maternal serum alpha fetoprotein days, and just to see how we leapfrog to this age when we would just, like when we had an abnormal MSAFP, to do all this testing of, doing ultrasounds and all kinds of things. And and you and I know, all of us hopefully know, that folic acid has taken care of that in a lot of ways. It would be nice to know too what the genomics of cleft lip and palate would be found. It is a common illness even here in the United States. G6PD has been taken care of, Fea told me, through the NIH. They're headed by Dr. Kutionko. And I think many more. The dystonia that is present in the Panay Island has also been diagnosed mutation-wise. It's an X-linked disorder, and it's something that I was invited to take care of, not to take care of, but be involved as well. But I had limitations with travel, and limitations with funding. The last thing that I would like to say is I am so very glad that this Philippine Genome Center is being maintained under the auspices of the UP system. My career in medical genetics was under the auspices too of Cook County finances, and it was not an issue to order the most expensive test, although of course I would be a little embarrassed to do that because I would be asked by the director. But to have the problem or the issue of expenses not really eliminated, but at least lessened for these families is such a nice development. And I was a resident at the Philippine General Hospital, and expenses for medical care, admission, testing was still an issue, but not that huge an issue in those who are being taken care of by private for-profit hospitals. Thank you very much for being involved on this wonderful seminar, I would say, because we had learned a lot, and we are very much interested in following your big progress into magnificent applications. Good evening.
Thank you, Susan. Oh, that was a very interesting reaction. Now, for probably the best part of this webinar, we now call on Dr. Victoria Herrera, daughter of a famous dean of the UP College of Medicine, Florentino Herrera Jr. I started earlier that her genealogy is just almost as hard as to pronounce as Metabolomics. Comes from the first president of the Republic. But Vicky, I'm gonna not embarrass you, but I'm gonna put you now in charge of the question and answer period. So we're here to at your stage, madam.
Thank you, Dr. Billy. I always said that Billy rolled the R's in Herrera just like my dad used to. But anyway, I echo what Dr. Echeverry had just said. True congratulations. I remember, Dr. Lekbawan, I first heard about you when we were doing the UPMASA seminar series, and you were asking questions, and all that. But anyway, I think it's really great. You have the infrastructure, the vision, the logistics, the trust of the Philippine government, and you've certainly built a very nice nationwide system. If I may start with questions, and then anyone who wants to ask a question can raise their hands or just turn on their unmute themselves and speak. So my first question would be, Dr. Serafika. Would you like to ask your question? Your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Al Serafika. Actually, I'm a consultant for, I'm actually the chairperson for the board of directors of PAASE. And actually, we just had a session on OMICS 10 days ago. It's the focus group discussion of the National Academy of Science. Sorry, Fe, you weren't there, but Leslie was there, Pip was there, and of course, Eva and Nenjit Padilla is our national scientist in charge of it. I'm a member of NAST. And I just want to get down to the basics of how do we tackle the implementation of OMICS. That's what I'm after, having both Marc Edsel here, having his experience in COVID, and of course, Neil Bascos on Proteomics, and definitely Metabolomics, which I've been trying to advance together with Carlito Medrilla of UC Davis, and of course our current president, Gladys Completo, who's also in Metabolomics. My question is really more of the way we treat the problems in the Philippines now at the National Academy level is to form transdisciplinary teams. this is forming a group of not only scientists, but also regulators, entrepreneurs, risk capital, both your AGI, academic, government, industry. But industry can be taken into 3 different forms: startups and spin-offs, corporate, and corporate foundations. So I revolve on all of those environments in various technologies. I had my own biotech company in the US for 17 years. And when I came back as a balik scientist in 2014, I'm all about technology commercialization and utilization and increasing IP output for UP, LaSalle, and the rest of the country, together with USAID. And in the last 10 years, we've tried to increase the spin-off capability of UP. And definitely one of the avenues that I'm hoping for, I've been coaxing actually Pia Bagamasman to start a spin-off since COVID. But of course, he's very much of an academic nature. He was our OIS 2 years or 3 years ago at NAST. And they were discussing, of course, some of the gene markers that he's discovered. But what emerged in the 10 days ago in the discussion is the adoption of the Philippine Cardiovascular Society, because our MC was Dr. Roddy C., which is also a prominent cardiologist, I assume. And definitely the Philippine Heart Center Association was past president, and the current president was there as well. But what's emerging as the potential applications for omics, indeed, is looking at effectiveness of current drug or intervention regimen to assist doctors to find the right, for lack of a better word, formula or cocktail, which is obviously, we know that it's being done already on breast cancer. They analyze the omics of the patient, and then they target specific treatments for them in order to have almost an 85–90% effectiveness rate. But in the Philippines, I was supposed to be part of the PICARI project together with National Sciences, Menchit Padilla. I was supposed to replace him 10 years ago when he became chancellor of UP Manila. And we are always determined or driven by the disease set, the top 10 disease killers of the Philippines. And clearly, some of the papers that you've shown, Neil, is on diabetes. Cardiovascular disease is still the highest. So the question that I pose to you guys is, you're one level from us in the sense of thinking. I was thinking about a global sense, but you are the operators, you're the implementers, and you have the actual tools. I don't care to fathom how a mass spec LCMS or some of your new machines that I've seen that are quite fancy. But I'm looking at it as in the deployment, because we do. My challenge to Eva Cotionco is actually now, Eva is part of a separate group of mine for an Institute for Implementation of Technologies. And we are wanting to make sure that we utilize whatever resources we've gathered over COVID. We now have RT-PCRs over several regions, of course, 2 of the UPs in Mindanao and Visayas are part of the UP system, Tech Transfer and Business Development Group. So I've been looking at potentially using all this available resources as well as manpower. Tia straight over 1,000 from what I've heard from her in terms of RT-PCR technologies and omics. So kindly identify, or I mean, I'm giving you a lead, because if I were to implement a an omics tool diagnostic, I was part of the ASEAN Diagnostic Hub together with A-Star and headed by Jimmy Montoya in 2018 and 2019. We group with the ASEAN group. And at that point, our target was, this pre-COVID 2019, was looking at dengue in the ASEAN region. And we were able to convince Indonesia actually to go after it and adopt Raul Distura's technology, the lab in a mug, for potential 100 million kits needed by Indonesia at that time. This is pre-COVID. 3 months later, COVID hit. Picture changed. Now everyone has RT-PCRs. Now, what can we do in terms of the omics technologies that we are capable of doing with the machine that we have and the learnings that we were able to acquire during COVID, to then deploy omics technology in creating a cardiovascular kit or diagnostic to help our current doctors to reduce the mortality rate of cardiovascular diseases. To me, that's the post of the question, and look forward probably starting with Fe in terms of how would you go about this. And
so
then
actually, we have rudimentary projects within PGC from the findings that Rodi C and Eva had on their paper published, right? So cardiovascular disease is a complex disorder. You practically have to get to the point where what are of these, of the genes that are contributing to hypertension, to cardiomyopathy, to all these other connective tissue disorders, you practically would need to comb those genes, right? However, I think the low-lying fruit is actually pharmacogenomics for hypercholesterolemia. Familial hypercholesterolemia, I'm sure, is abundant in the Philippines. You can only just talk to people, oh, my father had it, my mom had it.
I'm actually on Lipitor, 15
yeah,
years.
Yeah, I'm taking Lipitor. Okay, yeah. So point being that I think what needs to happen is we've looked at what we haven't really looked at what are the most common causes of hypercholesterolemia in the Philippines, right? So I've asked my some of the researchers within PGC to look into what can we do to get some of the genes really screened, right? And at the same time, when Rodi C and Eva actually had this findings on calcium channel blockers and hypertension, and there are some SNPs or variants that are actually affecting maybe effectivity or efficacy of the drug, we probably should target those. And I think Dr. Reyes, who actually just joined PGC, I've given that as an assignment, and we're in the process as we speak of really trying to figure out how are we going to do the diagnostic part of that. So they've already started the PCR work, and he was just texting me that they have good products, and so we're going to sequence and validate that as a test, right? So the next step actually is going back to the cardiologist or even just Dr. Rodi C and say, look, we're able to do this. What is the clinical utilization, right? So if it is something that's applicable in the clinic, let's do a clinical utilization study and a clinical validation study. So practically we're in that stage. We prioritize those because there's not a lot, there's more to teach folks in the PGC. There are certain things that they can do, but the development for laboratory developed tests is not something that they normally do. So luckily, I've done that a lot in the US, and I was part of a big reference laboratory in the US. So that's kind of like what our development for the past 6 months. But the one that is not publicly known, and I probably should kind of share it too, is the reason why I'm in the US is practically we're trying to partner with a laboratory that has all of those testing already packaged, right? So they've done all those testing, and I was part of that, and I developed a lot of laboratory tests in a reference lab that I worked with. I'm trying to convince them that there's a path in terms of helping a third world country. We don't have all of those testing because validation, every test that I validated when I was with that reference laboratory will cost at least $100,000, right? So we're not that rich. So practically what we need to do is give me the technology, I transfer it in the Philippines, use it to help Filipinos, but then in that process, we actually gain capacity, we gain experience, and then we do the rest of the other genes that are actually out there, right? So to me, it's like you transfer the initial technology and then we choose what we want. So we can build that kind of penetration within the Philippines. And I will tell you, I will share again, in my 6 months in the PGC, how many interested parties had come to us and had talked to us, and they're foreigners, right? So to me, it's like, oh my God, I'm not going to give you all my ideas because it's the Philippines. We cannot be just in the receiving end. We should be advancing in such a way that we will be part of all this revolutionized way of diagnostics in genetics and genomics. So that is just my philosophy, but I mean, I reserve the ability to, like, I wanted to transfer, and that's the reason why I'm appealing to every one of you guys in the audience. Let's build the Philippine capacity and advance genetics and genomics. We have the talent, we just need, and the infrastructure is almost, I mean, complete, right? So I think my one big, and I will express it again, one big fear of mine as I joined the Philippine Genome Center is talent retention. Okay, even if there are talent right now, how can I sustain them? How can I convince them to stay longer? How can I really sustain those hires, right? I mean, bioinformatics is very well in demand, even in the United States, right? There's very few laboratories who have their own bioinformatics people, right? So, and they're not inexpensive. They're expensive in the United States. So to me, it's like those opportunities are really readily available to them. They can, there's like one foot on the door. When I joined PGC, the next day, I was told that one of our med tech was leaving for the United States for Jefferson University. So to me, it's like, oh my God, it's like, I practiced in the United States for 30 some years, but I went back, but it's harder for people really to make those decisions, right? And so I even kind of like talked to the DOST and Balik Scientist program. I said, you've got to help us figure this out because it's something that we need to do. Singaporeans, I will tell you, Vietnamese folks are already more advanced than us. And even Bangladesh is more advanced than the Philippines. So to me, it's like you compare ourselves with our neighbors, we cannot be lagging behind because we have to move forward and we need to have those ability and sustainability to support this kind of like cohort of talent that we need to really stay in the Philippines to really advance the practice of genetics and genomics and omics as a whole too.
I think that's really great. The one thing that I would like to add is that we have to advance translational medicine. So when we think of all these omics, it isn't just genetic diseases, because now we're at the stage you're in, the monitoring or the advancement of new therapeutic targets, let's say for cardiovascular disease, you talked about it, but getting biomarkers for susceptibility to the vulnerable plaque rupturing or heart failure, for example, acute decompensation of chronic heart failure. Now, this is where I think your metabolomics and your proteomics could come in, because you can track the biomarker that is upregulated right before the acute decompensation or during the decompensation, and then after when you have major acute cardiac events. So that's where, you're following cytokines. So then my question is, would you have the capacity to evaluate microRNAs for epigenetics, because that is attuned to the decompensation in heart failure or in poor response in cancer. And I think it's going to come up as well for dengue fever and tuberculosis, the different stages from latency to active diseases. So one, that is the microRNA sequencing, and then the single cell RNA sequencing, because we have to evaluate the immune cells. And then this is where it has to be done in the Philippines, because from the time of blood draw to sample processing, that is critical. So it's like, I'm thinking response, you have your infrastructure. What you also have to build, I think, would be specimen handling centers, more of them, so the sample is not traveling so far. Because it isn't just the traveling, but it's also the time from blood draw to the actual preservation of the sample or processing. So back to the question, microRNA sequencing, single cell RNA sequencing, and then the microfluidics that is needed to pull out the extracellular vesicles. Because then the next thing is not just handling plasma or serum, but isolating the extracellular vesicles and then sequencing the microRNA in the EVs or the proteins.
Well, I will respond. I think, Dr. Hirara, that's really nice that you bring it up, but it's like for us to really go that direction, guidance and researchers within Philippine Genome Center have to be mentored, right? So point being that we're welcome anyone who wants to have those ideas. I think there's a forum for grant applications and prioritization in terms of technology transfer and advancement. But I will just, it's if we have the people who are really interested in doing it and we are able to do it, the platform is already there. It's like we have Nova-6, we have Next-6, we have My-6. It's like, it's all like, and then of course, single cell sequencing, there are platforms too, but I cannot bring them in until there's actually a research that has been approved by whoever granting agency, right? So in fact, the Philippine Genome Center acquired most of their infrastructure and equipment because of research that are actually being coursed through or implemented by the Philippine Genome Center. So again, it's like, it's the reason why all the infrastructures, little by little, we're building it, because we know that there's I think we're anticipating a lot of advancements that we could actually handle given the infrastructure. So I think my priority was bioinformatics because I know that sequencing is a platform based, and if there's any R&D work that needs to be done at the Philippine Genome Center, that capital outlay for the equipment can be found. So then the talent that actually would process the data is something that I had to do first. But I'm with you. I think if we really want to advance, we have to do more of the other platforms. And that's the reason why I invite people to like really be actively participating in whatever we need to advance.
Right. So Billy, this is where
yeah, sorry. No, I might forget. I wanted to address one more of us concern in terms of the NAST, right? And it's very important. The way I see it, and I observe it, right? The funding agency or the grant funding authorities, right, asked for proposals. But in a way, to me, it's like they need to understand that there's limitations in terms of experts, infrastructure, and really people who would really follow through and translate it, right, in the clinic, in the field, like for animal husbandry or anything like that. They need to understand that they need to focus funding in the areas where I'm not saying just PGC, right? But the point is, like, don't give funding to some institutions who don't have bioinformatics and they want a sequencer. Because at the end of the day, they will come back to us in the Philippine Genome Center or in some established government or institutions that have bioinformatics. To me, it's like concentrate and focus on certain proposals that are really realistic and are translatable, and outcomes deliverables are going to happen. Because to me, it's like if you have one big pie and there's like 16, 15, 20 people who are going to divide the pie, your impact for your funding is very small. So if it's a program, and that's DOST, DOH and DOH. We're trying to influence the DOH in terms of the cancer center. They came to us for biorepository. We're trying to tell them, yes, we can help you for biorepository, but please do us a favor. We have these identified gaps within the whole service and R&D work. And if you're funding, like for example, Viral Institute of the Philippines, they need sequencing. Do you give Viral Institute of the Philippines the same infrastructure that you've already given the Philippine Genome Center? Maybe they're not, right? Because there's synergistic way of utilizing those resources, and that if they need bioinformatics people, we have bioinformatics people. So to me, it's like identify the strengths of the different centers and then put them together to answer whatever needs to be answered as prioritized so that we can translate more into the field and into the hospitals or whatever kind of products we have.
I hear you, Fair. I mean,
Yes.
definitely the directions we're taking right now is looking at potential partnerships already for product development. Because my marching orders definitely from the PCHRD is to really get everything in clinical. We spent over ₱1 billion in Tuklas Lulas. We're now 1.36 billion on genomics. We have other programs that we did 350 million in COVID medical devices with Edward Wang in UP Manila. All of those have not gotten into the clinical setting, guys. There's no translation that's happening. I agree with you, sorry, but the environment in the Philippines is so challenged, starting with our regulatory environment, not having investigational device exemption capability approval, nor biosafety and biocompatibility testing capability. I come from the US also. I was there for 17 years. I had my own biotech company. I know the gaps. And right now we've been filling the gaps for the last 10 years. And we need all the help we can get. And we need to help each other as well, because otherwise none of us will succeed. But yes,
Right. So
work together
I
and
think
definitely, I'm all for it. When are you coming back in the Philippines, Pe?
I'm there next month.
Okay, I'll see you. Thank you.
all right, Gladys has a question.
Hi, okay, so actually it's not really a question, just a comment. So thank you very much, Fair, and then Neil and Mark. I just wanted to share that we also started the omics work, and this is on glycoproteomics that Dr. Librilla introduced to us. And so that was funded by Picari, and we were supposed to get additional funding to purchase an equipment because we wanted really to start this for biomarker discovery. Glycoproteomics is really very important, but unfortunately it was taken back from us. It was already here in UPLB, yung money, and because of the this very slow process of procurement, and thank God there's a new procurement law now that will be approved soon by our president. Then maybe it will help us a lot also to retain one of the problems that you mentioned, Fair, to retain our talents. So and we were able, we experienced a lot of problems. First is, if you're doing biomarker discovery, you need to have a lot of volunteers. And when we did that, it was during the pandemic. So we only had like 50 pairs of disease and non-disease, volunteers. So, and you need a lot of volunteers if you want to do biomarker discovery. So I'm just sharing with you guys, we started it with lung cancer, and, the second to breast cancer in terms of, high cases of here in the Philippines. So, and we also use, because we did that in Carlito's lab, we also use the Thermo Fisher Orbitrap. So we have that data. Okay, so we can share it with you, and I hope in your 100 million what's that?
Genomics.
I hope you can include lung cancer there. We can start that, and then Carlito's coming this July, so I would like to invite all of you to join our conference. So maybe we can have a meeting and really work together to come to make this faster. It's really, I agree with you, everything is so slow here in the Philippines. Super bagal po talaga, and we need people who at least have the momentum to work together. And then at least PGC, your Orbitrap is working. Hopefully, we're also doing metabolomics here in UPLB with Pascual Pharma. And then, yeah, the key here is we have to think big and come up with a project, not because the UST's approaches, if one center has this instrument, they won't give you another one. And PGC won't be able to do all of those analysis. They have to give some, they have to distribute the funding. So now they're also distributing it to the Visayas region. They're doing it to USA, University of San Agustin. But I think, and that's well and good. That's good for the Visayas region. But even in Luzon, we do need more. Right? We do need more funding for instruments, not just for infrastructure, because PGC is just one. We can work together and come up with more results. And as Al mentioned, they want products. But how can we come up with products if we don't even enough data, right? So we don't have the right data yet for, say, for example, biomarkers. We cannot just use the limited data that we were able to obtain. So that's just my comment. And then I know I know you have a yes, Neil. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Actually,
Go
if
ahead,
I may
Neil.
just respond a little bit to your questions.
Yes.
Definitely we share your interest in doing lung cancer analysis. In fact, I wasn't able to share it, but one of our first partner projects with the PGC PPMF was on non-small cell lung cancer. And so definitely we're welcoming any collaborations that we can do to do more of this type of work. One other thrust that the PGC PPMF has is to somehow establish a network of mass spectrometry analysis that can be done throughout the country. We do believe in raising the capacity of not just one region of the Philippines, but the entire region as well, so that we can actually have backup systems. As you mentioned, there are times wherein certain facilities fail, and we would have to have, we could rely on other locations to be able to do this. And we're really hoping that continued discussion amongst the different researchers and potential industry partners is built so that we can really talk about how we can apply these findings that we have towards applications that would be relevant to industry, to the Philippines, to everyone. Salamat po.
Thank you.
Right. On principle, if you have a mechanism-based biomarker, then you can develop your therapeutic target. It's almost like
Yes, ma'am.
A direct line, which would then deliver the new drug and or the new biomarker kit. Right. So Billy, so it's almost like I see that it has to be a partnership with, let's say, for example, PGH, because for patient samples, and the characterization, you also need the clinical side, correct. In other words, when to get the samples and the characterization, and then it goes through the PGC. So whenever there is going to be that project, it needs, that kind of communication between the clinical side and the PGC. So I'm just thinking of PGH. But I do know that there are going to be companies, like Moderna, for example. COVID is going, they may be switching to developing a tuberculosis vaccine. So the Philippines needs to be ready that when there's going to be a vaccine to be tested, you have the groundwork or the basis that you've looked at many tuberculosis patients, analyzed active, latent, pre-disease, so that you already know, so that when a vaccine rolls around, the Philippines can be a site of clinical trials and do it better than what happened with dengue fever. But for dengue fever, for example, you do need that baseline too as well for your cytokine levels, et cetera, with the metabolomics. So I think there should be an agenda too as well, that if it's the Philippine government or DOST or DOH, that they will fund this with a perspective of your national agenda for health and research. Isn't that right, Billy? That it's also going to solve the problem or help solve the problem for tuberculosis and dengue fever, and not just the genetic diseases. Then this way it's more applicable and relevant to a lot more of the population in the Philippines. Then I think your funding will come. The drug companies or the vaccine makers will come and do their clinical trials in the Philippines. And it isn't that they're using the Philippines as guinea pig, but it's because it's a center. Whenever you try to do a clinical trial, you need a good setup. And if that is good, then the companies will come. Are there other questions? Dr. Marc Edsel Ayas, do you have a question or a comment?
No, but I do want to share that although my background in my master's degree was working in immunology and virology, I actually have shifted. I'm actually in nutrigenomics right now, and I'm currently working with the National Center for Mental Health. particularly because it's a growing field that I'm very much interested in, the effects of diets on mental health. And I think I have been in discussion with Dr. Lakbaon on our interest because we are strengthening our ties with the National Center for Mental Health. It is I was surprised when I found out about this. It is the largest mental health institute in the world in terms of number of patients admitted. And they are actually in line with aligning themselves with NURA, the National United Health Research Agenda of the DOST PCHRD. And they also are setting themselves up to be a reference center for mental health research in the country. So they are very much open to collaborations for any research. I personally am very much interested in the effects of environment on mental health and diet. And I've been actually wondering, if you guys haven't noticed, I know I'm from Ateneo, but I am also American. I have relatives there, so I go there every now and then. And I sometimes wonder, like, are you eating stuff that's making you guys a bit more whatever? So these are just some interesting things that I have in mind. I think that mental health is one of those fields that tends to be sometimes forgotten a little bit, but because of the pandemic, I think it's become a bit more salient in the minds of many people, especially Filipinos. So I think that's also another avenue aside from the communicable diseases and also the cancer research, that mental health is a growing field that I think the Philippines is very much ready to be a part of.
Oh, that's great. Right. So, Billy, do you want to continue or you want to close this? We're beyond. We're at 10:30.
I think I would appeal for a focus group within PAASE to really thresh out some of the directions, because I know what I know, right? But at the end of the day, if there are people who have more exposure on some of the technologies that we don't have and probably future technologies, we would love to hear from those people. So Billy, that's my suggestion for the next.
Let's do another round then.
Yeah.
Not really a true round, but at least it's like a focus group on what do you think should be the advances, or really like NAS did it, but at the end of the day, NAS is NAS, right? So they don't have like a clear kind of prioritization in terms of what do we need in the Philippines. And maybe both local folks in the Philippines and abroad, and we can say, look, it's like somebody reached out to me actually for single cell sequencing, and I've done it in my previous other life. But the point is, like, to me, I said, come look at how you would apply in the Philippines, and from there we could actually figure out whether it's something that you need or we need, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like right now, my mandate is really look for the diagnostic technology transfer, as well as really trying to help cancer genomics move in the Philippines, because it's something that probably is the kind of like, we don't have much to really offer patients. And unfortunately, one of my sisters had breast cancer, and I had to bring all the tests in the US and then give the results to the oncologist, right? So to me, it's like, I experienced it firsthand, and I know that it's very expensive and it's very difficult to like move a specimen from one country to another. And at the same time, I was already like in the lab, right? So how I met difficulties. How much more for those ordinary people who don't really know how to navigate all the system that's existing? So to me, it's like, yes, I promised the president of the UP system that we are going to focus on cancer genomics, and then Filipinome will come in a 2 or 3 years time, and then we'll focus on more genetic conditions. But we kind of like, we just have to like pick up what we can pick up and move on, because we have limitations. But at the end of the day, I'm very hopeful that we will get there, and maybe even competitive amongst the different players within Southeast Asia at least, and probably globally.
I totally agree. I totally agree. I'm okay for focus groups. Fair, that's yours. Billy. Right. And yes, you know, it's like we shouldn't keep
Yeah.
excusing the Philippines, but we should think that you can lead. And I think the Philippines can lead, and that we don't have to bring stuff over here. We should do it there in the Philippines.
Yeah.
We did it for the child abuse program in PGH, and now it's international, and people are going to the Philippines for training. Any other questions? I saw some.
Yeah.
Gladys.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead. Gladys, and then Al, Serafika.
Okay, so I just forgot to mention that part of our project that we work on under Bicari, we're trying to develop a Filipino lung cancer cell line. So to make it really more specific to us Filipinos, so that's why I really like your Filipinome project. And actually we're successful enough. So really I'll just discuss because we haven't applied for the patent yet, but we've been testing it with you know, the potential herbs. It's the natural product discovery as well. So yes, I'm all for the focus group discussion fair, and then we could invite all of these experts that who could work with PGC and really come up with a specific, a more focused project, and then that could help us and, you know, Filipinos. So yeah, so we welcome for another meeting, and then hopefully we can actually translate it to a hands-on, you know, hands-on discussion, training. So meeting, face-to-face meeting.
Meeting with a plan.
hands-on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Meeting with an
exactly.
action plan at the end. Yes.
Yes.
Not just
Next.
questions.
Actually, that's where I come in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, what we wanted to do from the focus group is to indeed identify the teams that will work on specific. Right now, the ecosystem of the Philippine Cardiovascular Society, together with Roddy, and I think it's Dr. Abola, who's THA now with Heart Center. I think that team from the clinical perspective is ready. So clearly, I look at the ecosystem of each of every specialty that we have in the Philippines that can localize quickly a diagnostic or an intervention. And right now, that's the actual reason we had that focus group in NAST. And now that I met you, I think it's high time that UP comes up with, for lack of the SWAT team that actually is going to go after it, considering all the players are from UP. It's Eva, it's Menchit, it's you. And definitely the one that Gladys had tried, I almost joined the company of Carlito Librilla that raised over $100 million 4 years ago. And COVID happened. But part of that program was to create indeed a biomarker for lung cancer for Philippine patients. But we were not able to effectively do it. The company has then shifted their focus back in the United States because the founders won the Nobel Prize and they won from Stanford. And then that's when they decided, okay, we're going to get an American CEO, forget the Philippines, and then focus on what they need to do to get money. So we need to create our own team here, our own hit squad, and own clinical verification and validation team to effectively complete the translation. I'm all about translation, guys, but 10 years being here, there's still blockages and challenges. But we can make it if we all gang up together on a single problem and create models. At the end of the day, it's really creating existing models like what Raul did for COVID, for dengue, and then for COVID afterwards. But definitely, he is our first spin-off out of UP in 2015 as part of the UP Tech Transfer Tech and Business Development Office that Giselle and I formed early when I came back as a balik scientist in 2013. And clearly, there are still challenges. I'm helping the device industry, obviously. So I'm appealing to the group also that it is a long drawn process. Any product development, starting with diagnostic, is probably 3 to 5 years away. But I'm hoping it's more of 3, given the talent pool that we have already and the head start, for lack of a better word. But again, I always tease our PAASE Rex that let's not do NATO, guys. NATO is no action, talk only. So,
I agree. I agree.
Thank you.
Right.
that. So,
That's
Change
what I always told
management.
Billy. We have to meet with deliverables at the end,
yes.
and not just questions.
Yes.
Anyway, okay.
And money.
Dr.
Don't forget money. We need to find the money. How to finish this thing.
Well, when you have the project, we will get the money. Dr. Billy, what would you like to do? It is 10:40 here. Are there any more questions? Otherwise, there's supposed to be a closing person. Billy?
Yeah, that's me.
No more questions? No more questions? Very interesting.
Yeah, but
Very
yeah,
interesting.
definitely the
Very
focus
interesting
group.
session.
Yeah, so
Before-
I have another suggestion, Billy.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think I've actually suggested it to Mario Santo Domingo, right? As part of PAASE's project, maybe we should do a database of all whoever is interested, I mean, members of the PAASE and all the scientific communities, we have to have a database of people's expertise so that we can tap on those people, right? And maybe it's us reaching out to them or them reaching out to us if they know that there's such an institution or some projects. But I think it's that kind of matching in terms of interest and ecosystem. If you identify the people who are there in that field and practically talks, I mean, I think it's better that way and everybody's interest is fulfilled, and hopefully that sparks a better collaborative environment and we can move certain aspects of this initiatives.
I think the vice president of PAASE is in attendance because we had this particular problem of sino ba itong mga PAASE members natin? Ano bang expertise nila? Ano?
We do
Kasi
have
PAASE nga, pero pag, kailangan nating, paano kaya itong artificial intelligence para sa education, ano? Maraming ang PAASE pero hindi mo alam kung sino. So that suggestion, I think, will be taken up very seriously by the Vice President of PAASE, Marc Peña. Peña,
Yeah.
okay? Well, before, long, very interesting session. Before I give the floor to the President for the closing remarks, the other day I read a quote from an Indian philosopher, India. He says, "You cannot see what is beyond the ocean by staring at it. You have to go into it." So today I look at that because a few years ago, when Carmencita Padilla and Eva Gatinko came over, they were at the NIH. Ano bang ginagawa niyo rito? Ay, sabi ni President Gloria Macapagal, bakit wala tayong Genome Center? Genome. I think they were talking about precision medicine at that point. But as we learned tonight, Philippine Genome Center, we have the golden rice issue. We have genetically transformed pigs that can be transplanted into humans. We have to prove that the Ilocanos are not better than the Visayas with the Philippine Genome. I'm just joking. But then, like I said, this is just the beginning of the conversation. So, Madam President, as for the closing remarks, may we have your words of wisdom, please. President Completo.
Thank you. So thank you, Billy. And on behalf of the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering, so I would like to thank our distinguished speakers, Dr. Fel Lakbawan, Dr. Marc Ayes, Dr. Neil Bascos, and our reactor, Dr. Susan Echeverry, for your insightful presentations. And of course, I'd like to thank Dr. Billy Cabillon and Dr. Vicky Herrera for organizing this enlightening session. So as we conclude this fireside chat or webinar, so let us recognize the Philippine Genome Center's unwavering dedication to advancing scientific knowledge and promoting collaborative partnerships. As Fe have mentioned, the PGC's vision is to be a center of excellence in gene discovery and genomics research that effectively translates knowledge into applications beneficial to the Philippine society, and particularly for the development of health diagnostics, therapeutics, DNA forensics, preventive products, and improved crop varieties. So PGC's mission vision and also PAASE's are aligned with PAASE's mission vision. That is, we involve our members in the training of scientists in the Philippines and abroad, as we believe that the youth will shape the future of science and technology and economy of our country. So one of our objectives is to promote contacts and collaborations among Filipino scientists all over the world and to help our country in our efforts to advance science and engineering, teaching and research in our country. So I'm particularly very impressed with PGC's programs.
Gladys, you got cut off.
Nag-freeze. Freeze.
Los Baños, I think they might have a brownout.
Oh yes, the brownouts.
Brownout in Los Baños. I'm in Manila.
Are you ready for brownouts and blackouts in the Philippine Genome Center? Yes.
We have backups.
Yeah,
Okay.
backup generators.
Did it freeze? Okay.
That's great. Billy, you can close if
Oh, we are going to miss the last words of our president, but I think we have a recording of this session. So anybody that's going to want to go all the way to the end, it shall be provided to you. Once again, a very, very insightful session. And I would like to thank everyone from Batanes to Sulu, from Hawaii to New York, Alaska. Thank you for joining us. And next time again, hopefully you can join us for another very, very insightful session. Thank you, everybody, and good morning.
Group, Billy.
And good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Good
Thank
job.
you, Ibsi. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you,
job.
Al.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very
Al.
much.
Thank you, Billy. Good job. See you soon.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
Billy,
you, Madam
for taking
Vice
over.
President, Dr. Pena.
Yes,
you.
yeah, I had to run in from a wedding dinner, so I'm in Canada right now, so I have to listen to the second part. But really great. Thank you so much for stepping in. Yes.
You are welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Susan Echeverry for
Thank you, Susan.
doing the reaction, and Vicky for stepping in for the co-hosting with Billy.
Okay.